A civilization that proves incapable of solving the problems it creates is a decadent civilization. A civilization that chooses to close its eyes to its most crucial problems is a stricken civilization. A civilization that uses its principles for trickery and deceit is a dying civilization. The fact is that the so-called European civilization, Western civilization, as it has been shaped by 2 centuries of bourgeois rule, is incapable of solving the 2 major problems to which its existence has given rise: the problem of the proletariat and the colonial problem. That Europe is unable to justify itself either before the bar of reason or before the bar of conscience, and that increasingly it takes refuge in hypocrisy, which is all the more odious because it is less and less likely to deceive. Europe is indefensible. Apparently that's what the American strategists are whispering to one another. That in itself is not serious. What is serious is that Europe is morally, spiritually indefensible. And today, the indictment is brought against it not by the European masses alone, but on a world scale, by tens and tens of millions of men who from the depths of slavery set themselves up as judges. The colonialists may kill in Indochina, torture in Madagascar, imprison in Black Africa, crack down in the West Indies. Henceforth, the colonized know that they have an advantage over them. They know that their temporary masters are lying. Therefore that their masters are weak. And since I have been asked to speak about colonization and civilization, let us go straight to the principal lie which is the source of all the others. Colonization and civilization? In dealing with this subject, the commonest curse is to be the dupe in good faith of a collective hypocrisy that cleverly misrepresents problems, the better to legitimize the hateful solutions provided for them. In other words, the essential thing here is to see clearly, to think clearly, that is, dangerously, and to answer clearly the innocent first question. What, fundamentally, is colonialism? To agree on what it is not, neither evangelization, nor philanthropic enterprise, nor a desire to push back the frontiers of ignorance, disease, and tyranny, nor a project undertaken for the greater glory of God, nor an attempt to extend the rule of law. To admit, once and for all, without flinching at the consequences, that the decisive actors here are the adventurer and the pirate, the wholesale grocer and the ship owner, the gold digger and the merchant, appetite and force, and behind them the baleful projected shadow of a form of civilization which at a certain point in its history finds itself obliged for internal reasons to extend to a world scale the competition of its antagonistic economies. Pursuing my analysis, I find that hypocrisy is of recent date. That neither Cortez discovering Mexico from the top of the great Tikal, nor Pizarro before Cuzco, much less Marco Polo before Cambaluc, claims that he is the harbinger of a superior order, that they kill, that they plunder, that they have helmets, lances, cupidities, that the slavering apologists came later, that the chief culprit in this domain is Christian pedantry, which laid down the dishonest equations Christianity equals civilization, paganism equals savagery, from which there could not but ensue abominable colonialist and racist consequences, whose victims were to be the Indians, the yellow peoples, and the Negroes. That being settled, I admit that it is a good thing to place different civilizations in contact with each other, that it is an excellent thing to blend different worlds, that whatever its own particular genius may be, a civilization that withdraws into itself atrophies, that for civilizations, exchange is oxygen, that the great good fortune of Europe is to have been a crossroads, and that because it was the locus of all ideas, the receptacle of all philosophies, the meeting place of all sentiments, it was the best center for the redistribution of energy. But then I ask the following question. Has colonization really placed civilizations in contact? Or, if you prefer, out of all the ways of establishing contact, was it the best? I answer, no. And I say that between colonization and civilization there is an infinite distance. That out of all the colonial expeditions that have been undertaken, out of all the colonial statutes that have been drawn up, out of all the memoranda that have been dispatched by all the ministries, there could not come a single human value. First, we must study how colonization works to de-civilize the colonizer, to brutalize him in the true sense of the word, to degrade him, to awaken him to buried instincts, to covetousness, violence, race hatred, and moral relativism. And we must show that each time a head is cut off or an eye put out in Vietnam and in France they accept the fact, each time a little girl is raped and in France they accept the fact, each time a Madagascan is tortured and in France they accept the fact, civilization acquires another dead weight. A universal regression takes place, a gangrene sets in, a center of infection begins to spread, and at the end of all these treaties that have been violated, all these lies that have been propagated, all these punitive expeditions that have been tolerated, all these prisoners who have been tied up and interrogated, all these patriots who have been tortured, at the end of all the racial pride that has been encouraged, all the boastfulness that has been displayed, a poison has been instilled into the veins of Europe, and slowly but surely the continent proceeds towards savagery. And then one fine day, the bourgeoisie is awakened by a terrific reverse shock. The Gestapos are busy, the prisons fill up, the torturers round the racks invent, refine, discuss. And people are surprised. They become indignant. They say, "How strange, but never mind, it's Nazism, it'll pass." And they wait, and they hope, and they hide the truth from themselves, that it is barbarism, but the supreme barbarism, the crowning barbarism that sums up all the daily barbarisms. It is Nazism, yes, but that before they were its victims, they were its accomplices. That they tolerated that Nazism before it was inflicted on them. That they absolved it, shut their eyes to it, legitimized it, because until then it had been applied only to non-European peoples. That they have cultivated that Nazism, that they are responsible for it, and that before engulfing the whole of Western Christian civilization in its reddened waters, it oozes, seeps, and trickles from every crack. Yes, it would be worthwhile to study clinically, in detail, the steps taken by Hitler and Hitlerism, and to reveal to the very distinguished, very humanistic, very Christian bourgeois of the 20th century that without his being aware of it, he has a Hitler inside him, that Hitler inhabits him, that Hitler is his demon, that if he rails against him he is being inconsistent, and that at bottom what he cannot forgive Hitler for is not the crime in itself, the crime against man. It is not the humiliation of man as such. It is the crime against the white man, the humiliation of the white man, and the fact that he applied to Europe colonialist procedures, which until then had been reserved exclusively for the Arabs of Algeria, the coolies of India, and the blacks of Africa. And that is the great thing I hold against pseudo-humanism, that for too long it has diminished the rights of man, that its concept of those rights has been, and still is, narrow and fragmentary, incomplete and biased, and all things considered, sordidly racist. I've talked a great deal about Hitler, because he deserves it. He makes it possible to see things on a large scale and to grasp the fact that capitalist society, at its present stage, is incapable of establishing a concept of the rights of all men, just as it has proved incapable of establishing a system of individual ethics. Whether one likes it or not, at the end of the blind alley that is Europe, I mean the Europe of Adenauer, Schumann, Badeau, and a few others, there is Hitler. At the end of capitalism, which is eager to outlive its day, there is Hitler. At the end of formal humanism and philosophic renunciation, there is Hitler.